depth. We're now joined in studio by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the Special Envoy for the Somali refugees, Ambassador Mohamed Abdi Affey. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so, we talk about Somali refugees and a lot of people perhaps have seen a few in South Africa, and we see a lot of images, particularly in countries like Kenya. Just how big and how enormous a problem is it? How many, give us a sense of how many Somalis have been displaced.
Well, first of all, it's important to know that the Somali refugee situation is the world's most protracted situation. We're talking about a single population in exile 27 years, and we're still counting. And it's also the world's most diverse in terms of the regions of the world that they have traveled to seek for security and support. And therefore, we are talking about now a situation of the countries neighboring Somalia, which is the immediate countries neighboring Somalia, of Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, Uganda, including Yemen. We're talking about 900,000 Somali refugees still in exile. And after the countries neighboring Somalia, Southern African countries are also some part of Africa that the Somalis have found safety and security. And South Africa alone today accounts for nearly 35,000 that at least are formally registered, but it could be a little more than that.
Are people still leaving Somalia as we speak?
Well, you see that the situation in Somalia, as a result of the civil war, that the central government in Somalia at that time was completely destroyed, and therefore there was huge population of Somalis going out of Somalia seeking for safety. But now, even though the number might have reduced, but still we have numbers coming out of Somalia as a result of drought and as a result of security challenges. So there is need for the international community and the countries that continue to host this population to be patient with this population, to continue to help them and to protect them, to continue to provide them with the asylum space, because as you will know, that nobody chooses to become a refugee. There are compelling factors that force people out of their countries, and we are satisfied that the support the Somalis have received from the neighboring countries, and including the countries which are not necessarily neighboring countries like South Africa, have been quite useful to provide protection to this particular population.
And so what brings you to South Africa? There is quite a community here, isn't there?
Well, in South Africa, I have come here, first of all, to appreciate and to deliver the message of the High Commissioner to the South African government, to thank them for the continued hospitality of this particular population, for the generosity of the South African people, because it's important, first of all, to recognize that. And secondly, of course, to come and appreciate challenges that this population continues to face, not only in South Africa, but wherever they have been. And we try to see how we can be able to do advocacy role for them. It might be understood that this particular population, in my view, has been forgotten because the focus essentially moved to new crises in Syria, in South Sudan, in Burundi, in Yemen. And therefore, a population that got displaced 27 years ago, there's temptation to think that that population really doesn't require continued protection. And therefore, part of my role is to come and provide advocacy for this population, continue to have a dialogue with the governments that continue to host them while we thank them, and also try to understand the unique challenges they face.
All right, so we know what's happening inside Somalia. It's, as you said, hunger, famine, agricultural challenges, drought, but also the war and the insurgency of groups such as Al-Shabaab. Explain to us the plight of Somali refugees outside Somalia. What are the things that they're typically having to face living in exile? Well,
first of all, when you live in exile, you leave home. And home is the best place that you can be able to grow. Part of the challenges that they face, particularly with the fact that a protracted situation like this one is dwindling attention. The dwindling attention to that population comes with the dwindling resources. And those resources that are so useful and so needed to continue to provide protection, to give education, to give shelter, to give food. These are very basic services that if the attention of the international community moves away from this population, then they continue to suffer. Secondly, part of the role that I have is to galvanize international support to join the efforts of the United Nations and the sub-region, including the African Union, in creating better conditions inside Somalia. Because Somalia needs to get back its dignity, to get back its country, in order to allow the community outside to return, but also those ones inside to live in safety and in dignity. As we speak now, as you said, the ones inside are facing enormous challenges. Government of Somalia, which is recognized, government still is struggling with the basics. And therefore, there is need to have a collective international effort, including that of the African Union, to make the conditions inside Somalia dignified for those inside. And as we speak today, we have about 1.2 million Somalis internally displaced. We're not speaking about those who are refugees outside. So collectively, you have about 30% of the Somali population either displaced inside or outside in the neighboring countries and the countries within the sub-region.
Isn't the first step in doing all of these things stopping the insurgency and managing the groups such as Al-Shabaab? Until you've done that, all these other things become difficult to manage. Precisely,
yes. There are active, ongoing efforts now to achieve that objective. And we have African Union troops inside Somalia assisting the Somali security forces battling these terrorist groups in order to make conditions inside Somalia useful for those ones who are there, but even for those ones outside. Therefore, but that requires international support to the Somali government, and which is part of the role that we are doing advocacy in order to allow the government institutions in Somalia to be in charge of the country. And the efforts to that end is being undertaken now through the African Union and United Nations. And we are satisfied with the support the Somali government is getting, but we need more.
Are you encouraging any Somalis to start going home now, or is it too soon?
Well, you see, we are not encouraging return of the Somali population into Somalia now because of the conditions inside the country. However, if there are Somalis who wish to voluntarily go back to Somalia, because there are those who have made the choice to go back from Kenya, a few of them. Some have made the choice to come back from Djibouti. Others have made the choice to come back from Yemen. Others actually have made the choice to come back from around the world, wherever they have gone. Those ones have the voluntary choice to go back. But we don't think, as UNHCR, that the conditions inside the country is such that now Somalis can have a massive return. We cannot, for instance, promote the return of 1 million Somalis back into Somalia, because we know the conditions inside of infrastructure, of shelter, of security, of education. All those are compelling reasons why we think that perhaps it's not time yet to allow massive return of this population.
All right, you say that, but there is this controversial repatriation program from Kenya that's playing out as well.
Well, because we had a discussion with the Kenya government, and therefore, as we speak now, the return from Kenya is purely voluntary. Those who choose to go back have gone back. Those who wish to stay, continue to stay in the country. And I want to use the occasion to thank the Kenyan government, the Kenyan people, and the countries in the sub-region who continue to host the Somali refugees. And I would like to plead with the international community to support those countries, indeed, to cope up with those challenges. Because the host communities, as much as we think about the refugees, also require to get the support of everybody, including the partners who support refugee programs.
So after 27 years, nearly 3 decades, there's a lot of people who don't know what home is like, and it's going to be another story to get people to go back to a country that they know is theirs, but really don't know.
Yes, precisely, yes. But one day, I'm sure that they all yearn to go back. I have gone to all the refugee camps that host Somali refugees in the sub-region. And the Somalis have told me that they would like to go back home one day. I don't think there is anybody who wishes to live as a refugee forever. It's only compelling to take the option when the circumstances force you to do. But when the conditions inside the country are such that people can have a dignified life back and they can return back, they will return back.
Are you hopeful that things will change? And if so, what sort of timeline do you think we'll see Somalia at peace and people returning home?
I'm quite hopeful that Somalia is on the right track. I'm quite hopeful that the leaders in Somalia now are aware of the enormous burden they are carrying. I wish that those leaders get the support of all of us so that the Somali people regain their dignity like any other person, and that they continue to go back home and be part and parcel of the reconstruction efforts. But I also wish to add that the countries that have hosted this population, we need really to appreciate and thank them. And in particular, you know, country like South Africa, which has shown enormous generosity, not only to Somali refugees, but refugees from many, many other countries. Because in this country, we have over 300,000 refugees who have found home, and they have found really gratified that they have been welcomed in this country. And I'm really hoping that the countries in the sub-region, particularly those ones who are hosting not only the Somali refugees, can borrow the South African model, because in South Africa we don't have refugee camps. We have communities that live within the communities of South Africa, and they are treated as good as the local South Africans. So this is a unique experience that I believe personally needed to be replicated elsewhere.
All right, so Ambassador, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time. And also, I think, as you say, we should not forget that despite all the other challenges that are grabbing the news headlines, that the Somali story still is alive and still needs attention.
The Somali story is alive. The Somali story requires attention. Somalia is a very, very important country in this continent and in this globe, and therefore we need to give those people hope. And in as long as these challenges in Somalia do exist, I hope that the countries hosting the Somali refugees will continue to be patient and helpful to them.
All right. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so that was Ambassador Mohamed Abdi Affey, who's the UNHCR's special envoy for Somali refugees, trying to make sure that their plight remains on the radar, because they do want to go home one day, but perhaps not right now.